Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Are you able to see my slides in full screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a very important molecule, which is proteins, and I'm going to focus only on the digestion and absorption of proteins. So when we start talking about biochemistry in general, we divide it into four main sections. The first one is carbohydrates, and then we move to lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Okay, so just let me pause here for a second. And I just want to start my camera if possible. I would like to increase the interaction between us. Okay, here we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, we divide biochemistry into four sections. This is the protein part. So, and before we start talking about any section in biochemistry, we need to learn how we can get it and how we utilize it. Okay, in simple words, if you take proteins in your diet, what will happen to them? Okay, and to be a very good biochemist, what do you need to know and understand is from mouth to final part of utilization. So when we take proteins, we don't take them into their simpler forms, or we don't take them into their building blocks, which are amino acids. So in general, when you eat your food, it contains complex proteins. It's not simple. It's not just basic amino acids. So you have to utilize this one. You have to degrade it. You have to digest it. You have to absorb it. And finally, you should be able to utilize it. لأن نحن ما بناكل الحاجة عشان just for the fun يعني, right? We take these molecules because they have certain roles in our lives. They have certain roles in our existence. So when we start taking the proteins, we start with the digestion of those proteins, and then sending them to where they're supposed to be. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about the digestive enzymes. And when we learn biochemistry, basically we learn our enzymes, okay? And after that, we look at all the details of the mechanisms or metabolic pathways. And after we talk about the digestive enzymes, now we need to look at the absorption of the simpler entities or molecules that we get from digestion. And then we look at the abnormalities if we are unable to absorb those molecules. And after that, I'm going to talk about the protein quality, because it's not just about how much we eat, but also the quality of the proteins that we are eating. And next, we will look at the recommended intake or recommended daily allowance. So how much of the proteins that we need every day. And if we are unable to get it from the diet, what will happen next, and how this will be reflected in our health. So we're going to start with the digestive tract and look at the sequence of events where we can digest the proteins. So we start from the mouth. Of course, we put the protein in our mouth. We do the mechanical digestion by degrading those proteins into smaller molecules, and then we send them to our stomach, right? So mouth, stomach, intestine, and then absorption from there. So in our stomach, we have a couple of things that we are looking for. Number one, because we are talking about proteins, and proteins could be denatured by different mechanisms. One of them is happening in the stomach, because in our stomach we have hydrochloric acid, so it will act on those protein molecules, denature them, meaning that removing the bonding between amino acids that are forming this protein, okay? So start to denaturing the protein, make it accessible to our enzymes, and in the stomach we have an enzyme called pepsin. Okay, so before we take protein, pepsin is found in the stomach, but in an inactive form, which is the proenzyme, and it's called pepsinogen. Once you have your proteins, send them to your stomach. This pepsinogen will be stimulated, activated, and becomes pepsin. And the pepsin is an active form that will act on the proteins and start to hydrolyze them or degrade them. After that, we will send those molecules or smaller polymers of proteins to the intestine, where we are going to see more of the enzymes that act on the protein. So either from the middle of protein, degrading the protein from the middle, or starting to remove amino acids from the ends of the proteins. But the conclusion here, what do we need? What are we looking for? So the protein is a polymer of amino acids. So multiple amino acids are connecting to each other to form the protein. The digestion process will degrade those proteins back to their normal amino acids. And beside the enzymes, of course, we have the regulation by certain hormones, because our system is normally regulated by certain hormones. Okay, and in this case, we have two important hormones that help us with the digestion. Those are cholecystokinin, and the other one is called secretin. Okay, so what's the function of these two hormones? How they are helping us in the digestion? So they will stimulate the secretion of the some fluids, and they contain bicarbonate, and this will keep the pH in the range that we need it in the small intestine. So it's supposed to be basic, and also they stimulate the activation of the pancreatic enzymes that act on the proteins, and specifically CCK will act on an important enzyme here. It's called trypsin, and make it active, and this is one of the digestive enzymes. Before we have CCK secreted, trypsin is found in inactive form known as trypsinogen, or this is the proenzyme. Proenzyme means inactive form of the enzyme, and the enzyme will become activated in response to the food that activates certain hormones, and then the enzymes are ready to act on the proteins. So this is a very nice summary of the digestion process, where the gastric cells will release certain hormone that help to secrete the gastric juice that contains hydrochloric acid. So this is very important molecule that will help in denaturing the protein and make it into smaller or make it ready to be digested by pepsin in the stomach. And when we go to small intestine over here, we're going to see activated enzymes that will degrade the protein until finally we can get either amino acids or dipeptides or tripeptides. And in all cases, we have different mechanisms by which we can absorb all these smaller molecules to benefit from them. Another slide, which is also very important, and it will clarify most of the actions of the enzymes. So as you can see here, we see them as proenzymes. Next step, they are activated in the third column here, okay? And in the middle, you will see what will help to activate the enzyme and make it active. So for example, we have pepsinogen, hydrochloric acid make it active. Now it's an activated pepsin, okay? Pepsin will act on the stomach, in the stomach, and target certain amino acids based on their function group or R group. And what will be the end products? Remember, we start with the big protein here. Now we have peptides. So it's cleaving, it's hydrolyzing. يعني بيقطعوا علينا كده بدينا finally بدينا peptides. طيب, next we have trypsinogen. So again, this is inactive. لما يكون عندنا certain enzymes here, they will activate it and it becomes trypsin. طيب التريبسين ده بيشتغل وين؟ بيشتغل في الانتستين، ما بيشتغل في الاستومك. وبيشتغل على شنو؟ بيشتغل على basic amino acids, and finally we get smaller peptides and some free amino acids. Remember that if you have from your diet a bulky protein, you cannot use it as a protein. You have to divide it, you have to degrade it into smaller peptides and finally amino acids, and then you can utilize those amino acids to build up the proteins that you need inside your cells. Okay, so يعني زي ما حسنا مثلا عندنا examples بتاعت يقول لك okay, hey, you have to get collagen to have a beautiful skin. So in a way, this is it's not a right statement, but it's not wrong either, okay? Because your skin really needs the collagen, but it doesn't mean that if you eat collagen, it's going to go directly to your skin and make it nicer, okay? Because once you eat your collagen is a bulky molecule, okay? You have to degrade it into amino acids, then you absorb it, and it goes through many systems and many processes, and then finally you can use those amino acids to build up your collagen one more time in your skin. Okay, so but does it mean that if I ate another type of amino acid or proteins, it does the same thing? Yes, it will. Okay, as long as you have availability of proteins, you will degrade them, get amino acids, send them to your skin, and develop the mechanism of synthesizing your collagen, stimulate it, and then you will see a healthier skin. So this is just one of the good examples when we talk about proteins, because you cannot get the same protein from your mouth to any organ. They should be degraded. They should feed your circulation with amino acids, and then your system is very smart, okay, and very regulated. If you need an enzyme if you don't have it, it's going to be a fatal condition, then your proteins and amino acids will go and form that enzyme irrespective to any other mechanisms. Okay, so our skin unfortunately are not their number one priority. So to get to that point, you have to get more of the proteins to synthesize the proteins that. So, and there is always priority for your system, okay? So that's why you need to get exactly the optimal amount, not more, not less, because again, the absorption of any molecules, and specifically the macromolecules like proteins, like carbohydrates, like lipids, or also the other nutrients like, metals or elements like calcium, potassium, sodium. So if you take some of them in high amounts, it will affect the absorption of others. So just be very careful about what you eat, because what you eat it's you, okay? And it makes your cells and it makes your health, and it helps you to have a better life. So finally, after we degrade all the proteins using different enzymes, okay, finally we can get either smaller peptides or dipeptides or tripeptides or even free amino acids, and that should be the end of the digestion. So next, we're going to look at the absorption. We said that now we have smaller molecules and we are in the small intestine, having all these molecules in our small intestine, and now we need to absorb them. Do you have any question about digestion before we move to the absorption? Is it clear so far? Okay. So now it's digested and found in our small intestine, and now we need to absorb it. Absorb it means before we go to our cells, it has to go in the blood, in the circulation. And amino acids are water soluble, and we are a hydrophilic media, so we don't need transporters. Once we have those amino acids in the circulation, they can be transported freely, and we can have them there until the cells or organs required them, then they should go there and build up a new protein, or sometimes nitrogenous compound other than proteins. We call them specialized products. So the absorption in general could be either by diffusion or facilitated diffusion or active transport. These are the major mechanisms in absorption. For proteins or amino acids, we can use different mechanisms, but just remember amino acids and peptides in general, they are hydrophilic, and from the lumen of the small intestine here, after we complete the digestion, we can put them into enterocytes and then to the circulation. And from the circulation, next is going to be specific organs or cells. So this is one of the mechanisms by which the peptide should have transporters, because this is an essential transporter for peptides to allow them to enter enterocytes. Okay, so now they are inside the intestinal cells. Next, they will go to the circulation. And look at these mechanisms. Although they have transporters, but also they will exchange. They will enter the enterocytes with protons. Now the protons has to leave to keep the power here, okay, or the charges. Protons has to go back, sodium has to go in. Sodium has to leave, potassium has to enter. All these mechanisms just to allow the peptides or amino acid to enter the enterocytes in your small intestine and leave out of it. Okay, so the bottom line that they have to go through two membranes. This is one of them here, the basolateral, and this is the brush border membranes. And finally, we can have them into the small intestine, in the circulation. Okay, so after that, from the circulation or the blood, they have to go to the liver cells or any extrahepatic tissues if we need them. So what will happen? This is one of the mechanisms by which the amino acids can enter the cell. So this is our cell, right? And this is the cell membrane, okay? And it's lipid bilayer, right? So if we have an amino acid that's water soluble, it cannot cross the lipid bilayer over here because of the nature of the amino acids. So in some cases, this is one of the mechanisms by which the amino acids can enter the cell. So this is the cytosol, and this is outside. The amino acids are coming from the circulation. So they utilize what's known as sodium channels. So what will happen in this case? Sodium will bind to the transporter, okay? And this is how the amino acid can enter. Once the sodium bound to the transporter, now the transporter is activated and ready for the amino acid to enter by binding to the sodium. And now sodium amino acid as a complex will affect the structure of the transporter and together will enter inside the cell. And this is where we want the amino acid to be. The sodium now can leave through the sodium-potassium channels and leave behind the amino acid. So why do we need the amino acid here inside the cell? Because amino acids can form proteins. So let's assume that this cell needs to make glycolysis, and we need the enzymes for glycolysis. So we use those amino acids to synthesize the enzymes inside the cell. How about if we need purines, okay, to make our DNA? Amino acids also that responsible for that can help us to make those purines. So the point here is that we take the proteins from the diet, we digest them, we absorb them through the enterocytes or the intestinal wall, take them to the circulation, and we have pool of amino acids here ready for the cells when they need them. And now we can get them to the cell, and the cell will decide what to do with those types of amino acids. Okay, so what will happen if we have defects in the absorption? Remember, your amino acids have different R groups. So that means the structure of the amino acid should be different. And when they enter the cell, they have to have different transporters because of their charge, shape, type of molecules in the R group. So all this will affect the transporters. Okay, so if we have, this is just a good example of if we have issues with absorption, we have a disorder is due to deficiency in neutral amino acids. Neutral amino acids, that means they don't have charge. And specifically, we're talking about an amino acid called tryptophan. If we cannot absorb it, that means we cannot synthesize niacin. Niacin is a very important molecule, and without it, we will create a condition called plagra. Okay, so the plagra is like a butterfly structure here on the cheeks. This is due to deficiency of niacin. Tryptophan is used to make this niacin. So if we cannot absorb tryptophan is a neutral amino acid. If we cannot absorb it, then we cannot make niacin, and it will make this structure on the cheeks. But the overall disorder is called as Hartnup disorder. Okay, meaning that this individual cannot absorb tryptophan. And what will happen if we cannot absorb tryptophan? Why is it essential? Okay, why is it important? Why are we talking about it? Because it's one of the 20 amino acids that we need to synthesize our protein. Okay, so the question is, what will happen if I have 19 amino acids and I don't have this tryptophan? This will be reflected into the amount of proteins that we are synthesizing. Okay, so in order to make a very good protein, or the proteins that's needed by your cells, you have to have 20 amino acids, and one of them is tryptophan. Okay, so we need to have an effective system of absorption to get to that goal. Next, we're going to talk about the quality of protein, turnover, recommended intake, and deficiency. And I'm going to start with the protein quality. So as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, it's not about how much protein that you are taking. Of course, it's important to take enough proteins for growth and maintenance of your cells, but also the quality of the protein. Like some plant protein does not contain lysine. Okay, lysine is one of the 20 amino acids that is essential to synthesize your protein. Again, you're going to see very low rates of protein synthesis in your cells. So it has to be complete. Incomplete proteins will result into low synthesis of proteins in your cells, and you can take some supplementation, and also the protein digestibility is very important. So you need to get complete protein, and also has to be digestible by your cells. Okay, so what do we mean by the turnover? Protein is one of the molecules that we don't store. So either we use them or degrade them. Okay, so the protein turnover is about 1 to 2% of the total body proteins, and it's about 300 grams. So normally we don't release the amino acids from our cells. We keep using them over and over because they are needed on our daily life to make proteins. So for example, right now I'm talking, that means I need energy. If I need energy, I have to take it from either carbohydrates or lipids if I'm fasting. And to get that energy, I need enzymes, and in general, enzymes are proteins. So I have to be able to synthesize all these proteins when they are needed. Most of them are degraded. We don't store them. Okay, some of them, very few, that we use them regularly, so we just keep them in specific cells, but the majority of the proteins are not stored. They are degraded by certain enzymes classes called proteases. Those are proteins that are responsible for the degradation of other proteins. And we can find them either into the lysosomes or in the proteasomes. So lysosomes are organelles within your cells that are responsible for the degradation of proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, carbohydrates. يعني بينظفوا لنا excess of the proteins that we don't need, so that they degrade them. But as I mentioned, when we degrade the proteins, we don't get rid of them outside of our systems. We just keep the amino acids in our circulation so we can use them back. Okay, lysosome degradation or digestion doesn't require energy, so this is a simple process for the lysosomes because we do have all the enzymes there. Proteasomal degradation, this is another area or central cavity that's also responsible for the degradation. But in this entity, we normally degrade the proteins that are abnormal or damaged or denatured, or they are in the wrong place, or even also the regulatory proteins that need them for a very short time and we don't use them anymore. So all these types of proteins are degraded here in the proteasome. And the proteins, when they come here, they come flagged. Okay, so the proteasome will recognize them because they have a molecule called ubiquitin attached to them, and then the proteasomes will recognize them to be damaged or degraded. Okay, so now we have a question. That's a $1 million question. Okay, so how much proteins do I need per day? Okay, and in fact, there is no straight answer for that. Okay, I'm not going to tell you today to go and eat 0.8 gram per kilogram every day. This is the RDA for adults. This is the published one and the recommended one by nutritionists. But this could be affected by so many factors. Number one, let's assume that your kilograms are muscles. Okay, because this is different. Your weight could be mostly muscles, could be lipids, could be any type of storages, right? So if you are building muscles, this amount should be changed. If you are doing more activities, this amount should be changed. If you have health conditions, the amount should be changed. If female is pregnant or nursing, the amount should be affected dramatically. Okay, so this is just a base number that we can use, but this is not my recommendation for you. It depends on every single individual, and you should be able to learn how much proteins that you need per day. Okay, so probably I'm satisfied with this amount for myself. I'm not very active, but my son is trying to build up muscles. Okay, so what he can do, is this enough? 0.8 grams per kilogram. Definitely, I'm sure that my son at least taking 3 times this amount. So it's a personal, based on the personal lifestyle and requirements. And as you can see here also, for children and babies, it will be changed. And the most important thing that we should focus on the essential, indispensable amino acids. The essential ones, that are the ones that we cannot synthesize. We have 10 of them, so we should make sure that we take them from the diet because we are unable to synthesize them. Okay, and also there is no very much studies about the negative effect of high protein intakes. Okay, so this is what's published so far, and this is what we know as scientists, that there is no negative effect of high protein intake. So let's assume that here we said that 0.8 grams per kilograms. What will happen if I eat 8 grams per kilogram? So this is very high amount of proteins that I'm taking every day, but they said that there is no negative effect. It might not be a negative effect of having that protein itself. The protein is harmless, but it could affect the absorption of other molecules. Okay, so our cells has limitation of what to take inside the cell. Let's assume that you are just, loading your cells with a lot of proteins. So I don't think this is healthy, and I'm not sure if we can just consider this statement is 100% accurate. Okay, so finally we need to talk about protein deficiency and malnutrition. So there are two conditions that will show protein deficiency. So the number one is called kwashiorkor, and here we have enough energy with insufficient protein. So what does that mean? That means those individuals are taking enough diet. They are not malnourished, but they don't have enough proteins. So they are lacking proteins. Maybe they are getting enough carbohydrates, lipids, or the combination, but they are not taking enough proteins. So this will lead to edema because we are losing blood proteins, and we have important protein here of the blood proteins called albumin. Okay, so the albumin will regulate the amount of water inside the blood vessels and in the space between blood vessels and the cells. If we are not having enough proteins, including this albumin, that space will be filled of fluids abnormally and causing edema. The other condition is called marasmus, and this one is also causing almost the same symptoms here of edema and muscle wasting. You see that person are looking very skinny, but in this case, beside insufficient protein, they also don't have enough energy. So it's a condition that generated or created due to malnutrition, where all the nutrients are not enough, including carbohydrates, lipids, and our proteins. So these are the two different conditions that we are using here as examples of protein deficiency. So this will end my presentation for today, and I'm willing to take any questions. Do we have any questions, please? Can you hear me clearly? I think we did not record it. Okay, I see here Lena, Ola, Mona, Sarah. Can we have a quick feedback? المحاضرة كانت واضحة لكم؟
Yes.
اوكي، الصوت الصورة كله كان واضح، الباوربوينتس؟
يس كان واضح شديد. أيوه
تمام. فهمتوا المغزى من المحاضرة تحت الليلة Digestion and Absorption of Proteins؟
يس فهمنا والله، شكرا.
العفو. طيب ممكن سريع كده أعرف أنتوا من وين؟ لنا قالت من وين؟ لنا قالت من
جامعة المغتربين في الخرطوم.
اوكي، سارة؟
أنا من جامعة الخرطوم.
أهلا بيكي. منى؟ منى لو سمعانا يمكن
من جامعة الخرطوم، من جامعة المغتربين برضو.
Thank you. علا؟ منى please mute yourself. Thank you. علا؟ شهد؟ لو سامعيننا please unmute yourself and just let me know الجامعة بتاعتكم.
سامعين؟ أنا من جامعة الأحفاد.
Thank you. شهد؟ آية. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, just one last question. لما مشيتوا في المنصة انتوا دخلتوا عن طريق المنصة تمام؟ الناس اللي جوينت متأخرين
Yes.
دخلتوا عن طريق المنصة. لما مشيتوا في المنصة لقيتوا المحاضرة نازلة ولا ما قدرتوا access it؟
أنا لقيت رسلوا في الجروبات في لينك ودخلت في اللينك طوالي، لكن ما دخلت فتشت في المنصة.
اوكي، في أي واحدة فيكم دخلت المنصة شافت اللينك من هناك أو المحاضرة نازلة لها؟ نحن بس لأنه الليلة دي أول محاضرة فعايزين نتأكد إنكم قدرتوا تدخلوا
انا برضه
الحاجات
دخلت من اللينك حق الواتس
اوكي.
الجروب.
اوكي. هاي انت من وين يا جامعة؟ No audio. Okay. Okay, perfect. خلاص this is will end my presentation for today. عندكم أي سؤال عن البروتين digestion أو أي معلومة عايزين تعرفوها حاجة إضافية؟ عندنا about actually نحن we're out of time لكن في أي سؤال؟ اوكي طيب شكرا جزيلا وإن شاء الله نكون قدرنا بس نقدم حاجة بسيطة لطلبتنا وأولادنا وبناتنا في السودان. I'm very grateful إن أنا part of this academy and I hope it will be the light at the end of the tunnel for you guys. وإن شاء الله ما تحتاجونا كتير وإن شاء الله السودان يرجع بأمن وأمان وحفظ وسلام وإن شاء الله نتقابل في السودان. في أمان الله، مع السلامة.
إن شاء الله.
You're welcome, Sarah. شكرا منى، مع السلامة.